All right. So you guys should see my slide here. Again, this is going to be about commercial real estate. Okay. All right, just one disclaimer. This is for education and entertainment purposes only, all right? And you want to consult with your broker or your company or your attorney for your specific situation, all right? Because, again, like I said earlier, there's a lot of people from all over the country on this call or that are going to be watching this video. So, you know, for your specific state, there might be different laws, different rules. Even within your own company, you guys might have your own rules regarding commercial real estate transactions, okay? So you're going to hear me say that again and a lot throughout the presentation is, you know, consult your broker, your company, or an attorney, okay? So the first thing we need to know about real estate, commercial real estate transaction is there's no single way to do a commercial property transaction, okay? So we might think of residential real estate, you know, we have it in our minds for residential real estate is if we're working with a buyer, we get them pre-approved, we do an agency disclosure, we get a buyer's contract signed, we go out and look at homes, we put in a purchase agreement for an offer, we get accepted, do the loan, go to closing. For sellers, similar, okay? We do the agency, we do the listing presentation, get a listing contract signed, get an offer accepted, and we go to closing, okay? So residential, that's usually how it is. In commercial, that's not exactly the way that we do it. That is a way that it can be done, but in commercial, since there's multiple ways to do it, it might not be the same every single time, and we need to understand that and be flexible with that, okay? One thing, especially if you went to get your courses here in Minnesota, you might have heard some of the instructors say that, you know, there's wolves and then there's sheep, okay? So the government or the, you know, the Department of Commerce or whoever runs your licenses, they usually consider consumers sheep, and they consider people that are in real estate, business people, they consider them wolves, okay? So for the sheep, there's a lot of protection, a lot of consumer protections. In the commercial real estate world, there's not a lot of protections because they know that the purchasers are usually going to be business people, people that have more connections, more money, they have more resources, so it's going to be more of a wolf-on-wolf transaction, okay? So that's why the commercial transactions they can be different from one transaction to the next, okay? Now let's talk about the different types of transactions there are, okay? So the first one that we're going to talk about and we'll go into more detail is the property sale transaction, okay? So what I mean by this is when you're trying to sell or buy a property that is just the real estate alone, okay? So that's just, say example, if it's just a structure and then that's what's being sold, that's just a property sale for the commercial real estate transaction, all right? And then the next one that we'll be going into detail about too is the property sale plus business sale, okay? So this is where if you are going to do a commercial transaction involving the sale of the structure and the business within the structure at the same time, okay? So this is a different type of real estate transaction. The next one we're going to be talking about is the property lease. And again, we're going to go through all these three, but these are the general types of commercial real estate transactions that you could have, okay? So let's jump into the property sale. So first off, on just the regular property sale, we need to determine what type of property it is, okay? Is it a multifamily property? So multifamily property, think of apartment complexes. So in the commercial space, what's considered multifamily is anything from 5 units and up, all right? Now in residentials, for residential properties and residential transactions, we're counting 4 units and down. So fourplexes, triplexes, duplexes, single families. Those are all considered residential, so they wouldn't work in commercial. Now, you can still do a commercial purchase on a residential property, but it starts to get kind of muddy once you start mixing the two, okay? So if you do have a situation where you're doing a commercial purchase on a residential property, then you want to definitely, again, consult your broker, your company, or a lawyer to help you with that, because now you're mixing a lot of protections for consumers with a commercial transaction, all right? But multifamily, again, think apartment complexes. And then we have warehouses. So, you know, think of like of just a place where people store goods, like Amazon warehouse, or, you know, somewhere where they store just any type of good. It can be a warehouse, okay? So that's a type of commercial property. And then there's commercial retail property, okay? So think of like your strip malls, or just a regular mall, okay? Somewhere where there's commerce being happened, where people are going and shopping. Those are other types of commercial properties as well, okay? And then next we have office space, okay, or office properties. That is going to be similar to like multifamily, okay? So you can have a structure that has a single office in there or multiple offices in there that can be rented out. So, you know, you can treat that similar to multifamily, but it's going to be more of, you know, people doing business out of their office, not really there to live, okay? So there's office space. And then we have the newer one is mixed use, all right? So mixed use, just think about all the ones that we just talked about, but kind of mixing them together. So say like if you have multifamily and commercial retail. So think of it like if you've ever been to like your downtown, you see those high rises there. They have apartment complexes on top, and at the bottom they have retail spaces. Maybe they have like a Whole Foods or, you know, a nail salon or a restaurant or something down there. The reason why people and developers are starting to go to mixed-use buildings is because they want to, one, maximize the use, okay, of the space, but two is they want to spread the risk of the asset, okay? So what I mean by that is if you have just the retail space and if you don't have any retail tenants in there, then you're not making any money, okay? Or if you have just the apartment complexes, and let's just say that, you know, maybe the city or the local authorities, they pass very strict tenant laws, then you're kind of stuck with that. But if you have a mixed use, then you can spread the risk, okay? So if you have not as many commercial tenants, well, maybe your residential tenants can help float the property while you're looking for commercial tenants, and vice versa, okay? Or your commercial tenants can draw in residential tenants, meaning like if you have a big anchor tenant, like say example, you have like a Target at the bottom of your building, that might draw in you know, renters that want to live close to that. They want to live close to those type of amenities, okay? So that's why we're starting to see a lot of mixed-use properties become very popular these days, all right? And then there's a whole bunch of other categories of commercial buildings as well. So these are just some of the normal ones that we see often, but there's a whole slew of commercial buildings, okay, commercial building types. If you want to know more, just Google commercial building types and you'll see all the different types there are, okay? So the next thing for the property sale is we want to determine if it is a income producing property or it's not an income producing property, okay? So if it is an income producing property, the next thing we want to do is we want to determine the value of the property itself, okay? So how do we determine the value of an income-producing commercial property is by this formula right here, which is the NOI divided by the cap rate, which equals the value or the sales price, okay? And I'll go through what NOI and cap rate is. So the NOI is the net operating income, okay? So what the net operating income is the income, so take like the rents, any other source of income like laundry income, parking income, fees, any type of income for the property, okay? And then you're going to deduct the expenses before debt service. So what that means is you're going to deduct like utilities, you know, maintenance, any expense like that, and that is going to equal your NOI, okay? But you want to make sure you don't deduct your debt service or your taxes. And the debt service and taxes is your loan, okay? Because the reason why we don't deduct the debt service and taxes is because everybody's debt service, so if I got a loan, I might got a different rate loan than, you know, somebody else that gets the loan for the same property. So that's why we don't include those in the net operating income, okay? So again, net operating income is income minus expenses before debt service and taxes. That's going to give you your net operating income, okay? And the next thing that we want to figure out is the capitalization rate, or the cap rate, okay? That's the rate of return on a real estate investment property based on the income that the property is expected to generate. Now, the higher the rate, the more the return and the higher the risk, okay? So I want to kind of help you guys understand what cap rate is, because you guys might have heard what it is, but you're not really sure how to use it or how it's determined, okay? So as an investor or a purchaser or a buyer or even a seller, okay, most of them, everything is going to be based off of cap rates. So think of this. If you are looking to purchase a multifamily apartment complex, right, and you want to make a good return, so cap rates generally go from like 2% up to 10%, all right? So you can think about it like this. A 10% cap rate is where you're going to make a bigger return, okay? As an investor, you're going to make a bigger return if you go for a 10% cap rate, but for that 10%, it's going to be a higher risk asset, meaning that it might be in like a D class or C class neighborhood. The property might be very cheap because it's not being taken care of, okay? It might cost a lot of money to fix it up. That's the reason why the potential for the return is a lot higher. So you might make a lot of money, but you might be in a war zone, okay? So just understand that a high cap rate does not necessarily mean that it's going to be a great property, okay? And then on the flip side of that, a low cap rate. So say example, if somebody says, I want an apartment that is a 3 cap or a 4 cap. So usually those are going to be like the A-class properties that are like newly built, that, you know, have a high cost to operate. So you're going to have very good tenants. You know, the type of tenants that you get in there are going to be, you know, very good, high-paying tenants, all that stuff. But the cost to build it, the cost to maintain it is going to be very high. So your return is going to be a lot lower. That's why the cap rate is lower. But your risk is going to be a lot lower, okay? So most apartment investors, they're going to shoot for the roughly 6 to 8% cap rate, okay? So that way they can still make a return, but they're not in a war zone. All right, so you can think of cap rates like that as trying to help you determine where you want to be and what type of property you want to get, okay? So that's cap rate. So I have a quiz or question for you guys, okay? So I want you guys to type the answer in the chat box below, okay? So let's do a little math question or math quiz, okay? So if I have a $60,000 NOI, okay, with a 6% cap rate, what is the sales price or the value? So I'll give you guys like a minute. Go ahead and type it in the section below down there. Okay, okay. So I see some. So people are starting putting some in there. Okay. Well, most of you guys are right. Okay. Oops. It's going to be $1 million, all right? So again, the math is very simple. You don't have to be, a math genius or rocket scientist to figure it out. You just take the net operating income divided by the cap rate, and you get your value. Okay, so that's how you can very quickly determine values or sales prices of properties. Now again, it's not a 100% way to do it, but generally it's going to give you just like a good general overview of what you should offer or what you should list the property at. Okay? So that's for income producing properties, all right? So what if it's a non-income producing property? So again, going back to, let's just say like the warehouse, right? And the warehouse is empty. All right, it's not being rented out. There's nothing in there. The owner just owns the property, pays the taxes, and upkeeps the property. But the property is not generating any money for the owner, all right? But they want to sell it. Let's just say they want to sell it. So how do we determine the value? Okay, well, the value is going to be determined by the cost approach. All right. Now, as most of you real estate agents know, or real estate professionals know, that appraisers, they generally use 3 methods to come up with the value of a property. Okay, they use the comparison approach, where they compare it to other types of properties. They use the income approach, like what we determined earlier. Okay, and they use the cost approach. So how much would it cost to rebuild that property? So if it's a non-income producing property, generally they're going to use the cost approach. How much is it going to cost if we had to rebuild that property? So really not too hard to determine. An appraiser can do that for you, or a construction person or a contractor can give you a quote to see how much it's going to cost to rebuild that property. But that will give you a rough estimate of what a non-income producing property should be listed for or should sell for. Okay? So that's non-income producing, all right? All right, now let's talk about the business plus, or let's talk about the property plus business sale. How do we go about doing that, okay? Usually for properties that a business is being operated out of, that's what we're talking about, okay? So think about like a grocery store. So a structure that has a grocery store in it, or maybe like a liquor store, okay, or a bar, or a restaurant, okay? So think about like, if an owner owns a building and there's a grocery store inside of it, and the owner also owns the grocery building, and they want to sell both at the same time, this is what we're talking about, okay? So how do we go about doing that, all right? So in this situation, there will actually be 2 transactions simultaneously, okay? The first is the property sale, so the sale of just the structure, all right? And this can be closed at a title company, and it's used to transfer the real property, so the deed to the property, okay? What this does not do is this does not transfer the business, all right? So we're talking strictly just for the property only, all right? So how do we go about transferring the business? The business sale is usually closed by an attorney, okay, via a business sale contract or a bill of sale, okay? Now, both these things can happen simultaneously, but they need to be closed in 2 separate transactions, okay? So that's how you go about a property sale plus the business sale, okay? In this training, we're going to be going more towards the property sale, so we will talk about some of the business sale aspects of it, but we're going to really be diving into the property sale. But if you have a property where the owner wants to sell the property and the business, this is kind of how you would do it, okay? Now, let's take a look at some documents of how we want to make offers, okay? The first is the general documents that we need in a commercial transaction. What are they, right? Because if we really just do residential, all we do is we do the purchase agreement, and then we do any contingencies, and that's pretty much it, okay? But in commercial transactions, there's a few other documents that we want to do, okay? So the first is we want to use what's called a LOI, or a letter of intent, a commercial non-binding letter of intent. Now I'm using the Minnesota version, the Minnesota Realtors version of it. If you are in a different state or you don't have access to it, you want to check with your broker, your company, or an attorney to see if you can get a copy of, whichever one that you guys use. But generally, they're all going to, be similar, okay? And what we use a LOI for is in commercial real estate, okay, things can get very expensive. So we can have commercial transactions of hundreds of millions of dollars, all right? So by doing that, and some of these commercial transactions can be very, very complicated, okay? Because, again, when you think about residential, there's kind of just a standard way to do residential, but in commercial, it's the wild, wild west, okay? So we might have lawyers that have to go in and write up the purchase agreement for us just because of how complex these commercial deals can be. And the cost just to do a purchase agreement could be in the thousands of dollars, okay? But if we don't even know if they're going to accept our terms yet, we might want to do a non-binding letter of intent. We can use it as a pre-negotiation tool to kind of lock down the terms and all that stuff. And once we come to an agreement on the terms, then we can go to a lawyer and have them write up the official purchase agreement, okay? So that way we're not spending so much money up front to do that work, all right? But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show you the LOI, all right, on my screen here, okay? And I'm going to kind of run through it really quickly with you guys. Again, most LOIs are going to contain the similar stuff, okay? It'll have like who the buyer is, who the seller is, what the purchase price is, what the terms are, if there's any due diligence or contingencies or personal property that has to be hashed out, that will be listed in there. Any agencies or broker compensation can be listed in there, and any other terms. So the LOI should be very simple. So ours here is 2 pages long. Some of them can just be 1 page, but some of them can be very expensive too. It just depends on how complex the transaction is, okay? But again, what the LOI allows us to do is it allows us to get a feel for, what the negotiations will be like, and to kind of come to a pre-agreement before we actually lock everything down, which actually will save us a lot of money, okay? Or actually will save the clients a lot of money if we're working with clients, all right? So that is the LOI, okay? So once we have the LOI locked down and, we've made the offer, they've accepted it, and now we want to actually get a purchase agreement locked down, let's go ahead and take a look at our commercial purchase agreement, okay? So once we get the LOI locked down, we'll go and put everything onto the commercial purchase agreement. Now again, here, this one, I have the Minnesota Realtors commercial purchase agreement. And this purchase agreement is going to be really geared towards the sale of the structure, okay? So you can include the sale of the business into this purchase agreement, but, being that it's written by Realtor, it's going to be really geared towards the structure and not so much the business of it, okay? But I'm going to go and I'm going to show you guys this one as well, just for example purposes. Okay. So let me get it up here. So the commercial purchase agreement, again, it's going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be more detailed than the LOI because this is the one that's actually going to be binding on both the buyer and the seller. Okay. So again, it's just going to state who the parties are. What the purchase price are, who's representing who, if there's any earnest money involved, what the legal description is, what type of financing that the parties are going to be using, okay, closing dates, if there's going to be any deed transfers, what type of deeds will be transferred, okay, if it's a property that's being leased, if there's any tenants that will be subject to rights of the tenants, that will be in there. How the property taxes are going to be handled, that will be in there as well. Okay. And let's see, and then the possession. When are they going to take possession? And then the rest of the stuff here is kind of just the regular standard purchase agreement language. I'm going to go through these kind of quick. And then, any other disclosures that might be required. Now, one thing about disclosures is, again, remember what I said about commercial real estate transactions is there's not a lot of protection for consumers because the government understands that, the people that are doing commercial purchases should be financially educated, okay? So in residential, there's a lot of disclosure requirements, okay? So take, for example, here in Minnesota, material facts have to be disclosed in a residential transaction, okay? Not so much so in a commercial, all right? In commercial, they expect you to do your own due diligence, okay? So there might not be any disclosures. Some states don't require any disclosures at all for a commercial transaction, and I think most states don't require any disclosure, okay? So that's one thing is if you're representing a buyer or a seller, you want to figure out what all the disclosure requirements are, okay, if there is any at all right? And then agency, that's another thing too. In commercial, generally we kind of think of real estate, in the residential terms, right? Like there's a buyer's agent and there's a seller's agent, and then they negotiate on the terms, and then they come to an agreement, and then they make the sale. In commercial real estate, that's not really how it goes, okay? Now, if you get up into like the larger commercial deals, larger commercial brokerages, you'll see that most of them are just single agency, meaning that they will go out. Let's just say if I represented a commercial brokerage, and I'm listing a commercial building, let's say it's a large apartment complex, usually I won't put that on the MLS, okay? I will just go and find a buyer for that property, and so it would be a single agency, okay? Usually you don't see two agents going and negotiating with each other to get the property sold. That's usually just on lower priced properties and for properties that are on the MLS. But 90% of commercial sales happen off the MLS, okay? And they happen single agency, all right? That's why you don't see a lot of commercial properties being listed on the MLS. Like the big players like CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, those ones, they usually don't deal in dual agencies, okay? And most states don't even have an agency requirement for commercial. Okay, so take for example Minnesota again. Minnesota, that's one of the requirements is there must be an agency disclosure for residential buyers, okay, residential buyers and sellers. But there is no agency requirement for commercial, okay. So that's one of the main differences between commercial and residential, all right. Again, so here it talks about dual agency. If there is, then you put it on there. If most of the times, I would say 90% of the time, there's not going to be a dual agency. Okay. And then here's just other legal mumbo jumbo about the purchase agreement, and then signatures. So that's the standard real estate commercial purchase agreement for Minnesota here. Okay. Again, for you that are out of state or with a different brokerage, or if you're not part of an association or anything like that, you want to check with your company or your attorney for their purchase agreements. And again, this one is really geared towards the property sale. Okay, but you can include the business sale in there as well. Just understand that for the business sale, you will need to have a lawyer write up that contract, okay? So what we're going to go now is we're going to go back to the slide, all right? All right, here. Okay. So again, the two transactions, the first one will be closed by the title company for the property, and then the second will be closed by the attorney for the business. Okay. So let's say that there is an owner that owns a grocery store. Okay, they own the building and they own the business, right? But they don't want to sell. Let's just say they don't want to sell the building. They want to keep the building, but they want to sell the business, okay? They can do that. That's their right. So they would sell the business, but keep the building, okay? But what that creates is now that creates a commercial lease opportunity, okay? And that's what we're going to go into next here, all right? So commercial leasing, that's the next big thing that most commercial real estate agents do, is the commercial leasing, okay? And that's what we kind of have to understand as well. So in commercial leasing, the LOI can be used to negotiate the lease, okay? And that's what I really recommend, is using the LOI to negotiate the lease. It's because leases, again, can be very complex, especially commercial leases, okay? Now, when we think about residential leases, you know, it's very simple. You know, how much is the rent? You know, if they don't pay this day, they get evicted, yada, yada. But commercial leases can be very complex. Actually, commercial leases can sometimes be even more complex than purchase agreements, okay, just because of how they're set up. And we're going to go into some of the different types of leases there are. But before you go and you spend money on getting a lease done, especially a very complex one by an attorney, okay, you want to use that LOI to kind of negotiate the terms of the lease again, okay? The LOI, again, is going to be non-binding. So if the purchase agreement doesn't happen, then, you know, the renter and the owner won't really be out any money or anything like that, because, you know, they won't be bind to that contract, okay? So the LOI is very important in commercial transactions, all right? But let's take a look at the different types of leases, all right? We have to determine what type of lease is going to be best for that situation, all right? So the first lease that I want to talk about is the gross lease, all right? So the gross lease is kind of the most common one that you think about when you think about residential leases, okay? So say, example, you have a renter, they want to rent an apartment. That is commonly a gross lease. So a gross lease is where they just pay a set rent, okay, and then the landlord, the tenant pays a set rent, the landlord kind of handles everything else, okay? Now gross leases are there's goods and bads to them, okay? Now to all these leases, there's goods and bads. Gross leases are usually more expensive, okay, to the tenant because the landlord has to handle everything. But if there's overages, then the tenant is not responsible for it. The landlord would be responsible for it, okay? So that would be a gross lease. So in commercial, there is gross leases as well. We see them a lot for, like, again, for the multifamily. And then we see them with office space lease. A lot of them are gross leases, okay? And then the next type is the single net lease, all right? So what the single net lease is, pretty much the tenant is paying for the rent plus a portion of the property taxes, okay? It's going to be in proportion to the size of the area that they're renting, usually by square footage. So they're paying the rent and the property taxes, okay? So that's the single net lease. And then the landlord handles everything after that pretty much, okay? And then the next one is the double net lease, all right? So the double net lease is going to be where the tenant pays for the property taxes and the insurance, okay, and the rent, all right? So the tenant is going to be responsible for those, and then the landlord will be responsible for everything over that, okay? And then the next one is the triple net, okay, the triple net lease. This is the one that we hear a lot of in commercial real estate, okay, the triple net lease, all right? So what a triple net lease is where they pay the property taxes, the tenant pays the property taxes, the insurance, and the CAM, okay, CAM, or the Common Area Maintenance, all right? So what CAM is think of like a retail shopping center, right? So say like a little strip mall that has like 3 stalls, and there's 3 different businesses in there, and there's like a big parking lot, and there's a big lawn and everything like that. Who takes care of the parking lot, and who takes care of the lawn, okay? Because the tenants, the businesses, it's their you know, business that is using that, so they have to pay the common area maintenance, okay, for the landlord to keep the parking lot and the lawn good. The tenant has to share in that expense, okay? So again, the triple net lease, the tenant is paying the rent, they're paying the property tax, they're paying the insurance, and they're paying the CAM, and that's in proportion to the size of the area that they're renting, okay? So that's a triple net lease. Now, people are like, why would anybody want to do the triple net lease? Well, usually the rent will be a lot lower, okay, for the tenant because they have all those other expenses. That's why they tend to do the triple net lease, all right? And then the last one that we're going to talk about is the absolute triple net, okay? So you don't hear too much about this, but what the absolute triple net is the tenant just pays everything, okay? The tenant just pays all the costs of the building, the maintenance, the taxes, the utilities, everything, okay? The benefit of this to the tenant is that they practically own the building without having to buy the building, okay? But, you know, a lot of people, they ask, so if the tenant practically owns the building, why don't they just buy it outright? You know, they're already responsible for all the expenses and taking care of the property. Why don't they just buy it outright, okay? I want you to think about large corporations. So think about like Walgreens and think about like Walmart, okay? They tend to use this strategy a lot, okay? So what they do, so say example like a Walgreens, right? A Walgreens will go in there and build a Walgreens store, right? But after they're done building it, what they will do is they will sell the structure, okay? So they'll sell the structure to an investor, but they will do an absolute triple net lease. So Walgreens will build the building, sell the building, and then rent the building back, okay? And they will take care of everything. So Walgreens will do all the repairs, do all the maintenance, pay all the bills, okay? The investor that purchases the structure, what they're going to do is they don't really have to do anything. They just kind of sit back and collect the rent every month, okay? You know, maybe all they have to do is pay the mortgage, and they might not even have to do that. It might be automatically done by Walgreens for them, okay? Now, why would an investor want to do that? It's because they would be practically hands-off. That would be a hands-off investment, okay? So if they didn't want to deal with any problems, any toilets, any maintenance, an investor can go and purchase a Walgreens that's built, okay? And now for a Walgreens side, people ask, okay, why would Walgreens want to do that, right? Why would Walgreens build a building and then sell it but keep renting it? That's just not smart. But actually, that is a very, very smart business model, okay? It helps them scale a lot faster. Because think about this. If you're Walgreens and you spent $2 million to build a Walgreens, right, a Walgreens building, now your $2 million is stuck in there. But if you sell it, you can get your $2 million back and go build another Walgreens while still operating your Walgreens business in there, you see? So that's where a lot of these absolute triple net leases come in, okay, in those type of situations. So you don't see a lot of those, but they're out there, and that's kind of what they use them for, okay? All right, that's absolute triple net. And when you determine it, what type of lease that you want to do, you want to use a commercial lease agreement, okay? Now, in Minnesota here, we don't have the Minnesota Realtor commercial lease agreement, and I suspect mainly because commercial lease agreements can be very, very complex. Again, you know, just looking at the ones that we talk about, they can be very, very complex, okay? And again, in the commercial world, you know, it's really as creative as you want it to be, okay? So that's the reason why I think that we don't have one here. We have a residential lease agreement that I have, but I don't suggest using a residential lease agreement for commercial leases, okay? You want to determine the type of lease that you want to have, then have a lawyer that specializes in commercial lease draft up that lease, okay? But again, you can use the LOI to pre-negotiate the terms of the lease agreement, all right? Yep, again, yep. Recommend a lawyer to write up the commercial lease agreement, okay? Here, if you want to, here is a sample commercial lease agreement from this lawyer here. You can take a look at it, and I can send you guys the link to it as well. It's just a sample, so this is not by any means all-encompassing. I'm just going to scroll through it here just so you guys can look at it really quickly. But yeah, it's you can find templates anywhere. But again, I really suggest, especially if you are representing a seller or a buyer in a very complex lease situation, you want one tailored especially for that transaction, okay? So one that you did for a different client might not be a good template to use for your next client, all right? And again, most real estate agents aren't capable of writing some of these types of legal leases. So you want to check again with your broker, your company, or an attorney, okay? But let's go back to the screen here. Okay. All right. So now that's pretty much the whole transaction in a nutshell, okay? Going from the types of transactions, the types of properties, okay, into leasing. And what I want you guys to get from this is kind of like a baseline of how to, you know, think about commercial transaction and commercial real estate, all right? But we're not done yet, all right? You thought I was going to end, but we're not done yet. I have a bonus section for you guys, okay? And it's financing, because that's what we want to know, right? We're like, how do we pay for, how do we get a loan, or how do we, you know, get financing for commercial real estate, right? So let's take a look at it here. So unlike residential, commercial lenders usually will want an LOI or a purchase agreement first, okay? Usually they don't give out pre-approvals, because when we think about getting a loan, we think about putting in an application, then getting a pre-approval, and then just going out and shopping, right? That's really not how it works in the commercial world. In the commercial world, the lenders, they want to see that you have the LOI first, because you can go and talk to them without it, and they'll probably give you like a general idea, but they can't give you specific information, and they can't give you any real pricing, okay? Because they don't know what your sales price is going to be, or they don't know, you know, all the details of your transaction. With commercial financing, you have to understand that a lot of them are going to be portfolio lenders, okay? And what portfolio lenders are is people or institutions that lend their own money, okay? So they make the rules, all right? It's not like residential loans where most of them are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac type loans, where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they make the rules. They make most of the rules, you see? But in commercial lending, banks and commercial lenders, they make their own rules, okay? So again, you know, two people trying to buy the same building could get totally different types of financing, okay, because of the risk, the individual people, and all that stuff. So again, that's the reason why they banks or lenders in the commercial world want to see that you have an LOI or a PA first, or purchase agreement first, before they really dive in deep for you, okay? Now, down payments, generally, you know, lenders, they'll want anywhere from 25 to 50% down, depending on the risk of the asset. Okay, so how risky is the business or the building or the whatever asset that you're trying to purchase? Okay, so say example, like if you're trying to buy a storage, self-storage units, right? Versus you're trying to buy like a car washing building, right? So car washing buildings are generally a lot more riskier than self-storage buildings, you know. So the lender will take that into consideration, and they might require a higher down payment. Okay. So again, it's going to be very tailored to whatever it is that you're buying, all right, or whatever it is the client is buying, all right. And that's how they're going to determine it. And again, I just put 25 to 50% down, but really it's whatever they want. You know, they could require 75% down. You know, so it really depends on the lender. Okay. And then the good thing for commercial is larger loans can usually be non-recourse. So most of the times I see like if the loan is going to be like $5 million and up, usually the lenders will allow it to be non-recourse. And what that means is that the lenders know that you, Joe Schmo, that work a regular day job as a plumber, okay, probably don't make enough money to pay for a $5 million, $10 million property by yourself, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to actually not look at you, the borrower, or not look at the client, okay, the borrower. They're going to look at the deal itself. They're going to look at the asset or the building itself and see how much money it can generate that can it pay for itself, okay? Because they know that you're not going to be able to pay for it, okay? So they want to see that the building can generate the cash flow to sustain itself, and it will be a non-recourse, meaning that they don't have to use any of your financing. They don't have to use your credit score. They'll just base everything off of the strength of the asset or the commercial property, okay? Which is good, because then you can keep your name off of it, all right? So once you start to understand commercial deals and commercial loans and stuff like that, you'll actually find out that it's easier to borrow a lot of money than a little money, okay? So yeah, these residential purchases for, you know, these small fourplexes, those kind of things, it's hard to get those kind of loans. But if you want to buy a 200-unit apartment complex, it's actually very easy to get a loan, okay? So non-recourse is a very good thing if you can get it, all right? So below that, if you're buying anything lower than $5 million, or if you're buying anything that is recourse, they're going to require you to do a personal guarantee. So it's going to hit your credit score. If you can't pay for it, they're going to come after your personal assets, okay? And then terms, all right? So, you know, terms can be anywhere from 2 to 15-year balloon, okay, and up to a 25-year amortization. So what that means is that the loan can be, you know, the loan could be for 2 years, anywhere up to 15 years, okay? That's generally where I see it at, okay? Meaning that you have, let's just say if you have a 15-year term, then you have 15 years to pay it off. And balloon means that at the end of that 15 years, there's going to be a balloon payment to pay everything off, okay? And the amortization, what that means is that how long are they going to calculate the loan payments for, okay? So usually you want to aim for a very high amortization, okay, 25 to 30 years. Now sometimes they might give you like a 15-year amortization, all right? But generally, if you want to lower your payments, you want a higher amortization, okay? And again, all this, there's no standard. There's no, you know, standard 3.5% down, 30-year fixed, yada, 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 like in residential, okay? All this stuff can be mixed and matched by the lender. If they like you, they can give you a good term. If they don't like you, they might, you know, give you very bad terms, okay? So build relationships with commercial lenders, all right? The other thing, too, is they can sometimes throw in a interest-only term, okay? So interest-only is where you're making the payments just on the interest, all right? They might even mix it in there. Again, this can be mixed-matched however. So they can say, hey, we'll give you a 15-year term with the first 5 years being interest-only with a 30-year amortization, all right? So you can see where they can mix and match this. And again, it's up to them how they want to mix and match this. Every lender can mix and match it however they want. You go to Bank A, they can give you something different. Bank B can give you something different, okay? So you want to talk with all the different lenders to see what they offer, okay? What will they generally be looking at? So lenders will underwrite usually for the past 3 years of financials of the property. Okay. Now, if it's a recourse loan, then they're probably going to want your financials as well. They're going to want your personal financial statements, bank statements, taxes. If it's a non-recourse loan, they usually won't need those things, but they'll need to see like the past 3 years of the income and expenses and probably taxes for the property that you're purchasing. Okay, that's usually how they're going to underwrite it, and that's really what they're going to be looking for. Okay. So that's how the regular financing is, all right? Now, there's a lot of numerous other ways to finance a commercial property as well. And actually, in commercial real estate, it's easier to do creative financing for commercial real estate than residential. Because, again, residential, there's a lot of consumer protections, all right? In commercial real estate, there's barely any consumer protection. So this is where you can see like people doing a lot of contract for deed, people doing master lease options, okay, or rent to own, okay. Sometimes we even see some buildings that have been what we call wrap contract for deed or wrap CD. So they have a mortgage and then they wrap a contract for deed around that, and they wrap another contract for deed around that, and they wrap another contract for deed around that. So it depends on how creative you can get, okay? That's why in commercial real estate, the types of property, the type of deal, the type of financing, there's so many different ways to do it. And you as an agent, you just have to know kind of the baseline and go with it. But most states, they're going to require that you are competent in the business that you're practicing. So if you're going to be doing commercial real estate, you know, you really want to be competent in it, or have somebody backing you up that's competent in commercial real estate transactions, okay? Now, again, this is not to go in depth on any one topic on commercial real estate, because we would be here for like 5 hours if we did that. It's just to give you guys like a basic understanding of it, okay? Now, if you guys have any more questions about it, you guys can always reach me. This is my contact information right here, or you can reach me on Facebook as well. But, you know, I really want you guys to get out there and try commercial real estate, okay? If not for selling and buying, maybe try purchasing a commercial real estate. It'll really give you a good understanding of it. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. It seems very intimidating, but the knowledge that you'll learn from it, you know, it will really help you in your career, not just as an agent, but, you know, if you want to invest in commercial properties, that as well, okay? So that's pretty much it for today's little meeting here and presentation. You know, if you guys have any questions, feel free to stick around or, you know, put them in the chat section, or, you know, message me directly. But other than that, thank you all for coming by, and I'll hopefully see you guys at the next meeting and training, okay? See ya, everybody.